We have gone down some amazing rabbit holes. I know that you're having fun with this, but what we are going to discuss today, why the alpha tech operators that I am introducing you to, that I am discussing, are actually the one-eyed kings in the land of the blind. How did the land of the blind come to exist? That's what we are talking about. So this land of the blind, we are right now in the millennial pendulum swing. Before we get into the Gen Z, which I keep teasing, but it's just not fair to talk about what Gen Z is dealing with, how they are, if we don't talk about how their parents were, why they got to where they are. So we did talk about how millennials were originally the first more sterilized helicopter parenting parents. So the helicopter parenting that millennials had to deal with was the meritocracy helicopters. Do, work, be, win. We know that millennials rebelled against this. So as parents, of course, they're going to helicopter around their children because that's all they know how to do. However, they're definitely not going to do anything that their parents did. Because they didn't know how to build anything from the ground up, all they understood was how to work a system. So they Trojan Horsed it. They already were in the system, this system that had told them that they were going to be leaders, that they were going to succeed, they were going to be rich and comfortable. They were not. They were stuck in this horizontal meritocracy, rigged meritocracy system where no one could get ahead. They just kept moving up. They just kept moving around. And this is the system that millennials came in and they infiltrated from the inside out. Because, if you're a good enemy, if you really want to get into a place, you really want to destroy it, especially a strong system, you have to come in not like this roaring, I'm so scary, but you have to act like you're a friend. We see it right now coming. So many people have assimilated into our government, and now we're showing that they really were just gaming our system and they didn't want to be Americans. We're seeing that issue happening. So just see that exact same concept. This is what the millennials did with the corporate world, with the educational system. They were already there. They weren't allowed to get anywhere, so they decided to break it. There was already DEI in place. There were already things in place by the boomer age. By the age of the people, it's the post-World War II era that really they made some decisions about equality and about how to get equality that actually turned out to be detrimental. We see it now that they weren't the best systems to create, even in a global scale. Some of the systems and some of the agreements made were not for the best advantage of everyone in the world. They couldn't last long term, and we're seeing them break down now because they were not good systems to begin with. They were built on ideologies that had not a lot of foundation underneath them, not a lot of consistent structure, so those ideologies were hijacked. These same ideologies that were hijacked by the millennials in order to kill the meritocracy, corporate, and educational system. So they Trojan horsed it, they went into the DEI systems, and they removed every bit of structure, every bit of friction, every bit of hard work that you would have to do. They removed it all. They just got rid of it. They got rid of the boundaries, and they did create boundaries for certain people, but they got rid of the boundaries for them. For the most part, their goal was to create an entirely frictionless, no one will ever offend you. Not that you have to be resilient, but that you could become Play-Doh because no one's ever going to touch you. You can be mush. You're always just going to be a blob of mush. No one's going to mold you into anything. No one's going to bother you. You just do you. And that's the environment that they created by rigging the systems that were already in place, by completely adding even more system regulations because they claim that they don't like them, but they basically just use the system of regulation to deregulate the people in charge and make themselves in charge. Whether or not every one of them was doing it on purpose, this is exactly what has happened. They Trojan horsed HR, they Trojan horsed the corporate C-suite, they Trojan horsed every single prestige university. Some of those universities are kind of a joke now. They Trojan horsed it all, and they destroyed it. They took over the school boards. They took over the entertainment industry. They took over the legal system. They took over the Congress. They took over every part that you could take over. They were not having it anymore. They infiltrated the system. And in order to do that, they assimilated, and then they changed from the inside out. They assimilated, they became the system, and then changed all of the rules so that they wouldn't have to do anything, so that the friction would all be removed. And so through these millions of small little changes, this whole system has been hijacked right under our noses. And the reason for this is because millennials were raised in this hyper-curated environment, this space that was collectively created for them. They were told exactly what to do. Yes, they worked hard, but they didn't have friction. They worked hard. There is a difference. They were able to do what they were told. They were able to do it well over and over again and completely have the endurance to continue to do it. However, if they ever had someone push back, they didn't know how to deal with that. They didn't know how to work things out. They didn't know how to reason. They didn't know how to work through something. That was not in their parent. They were never educated to do that. So the second they faced real world resistance, their entire psyches were breaking, and they needed that resistance to stop. They didn't realize that if they struggled a little, that they would actually be that butterfly and their wings would work. They just wanted to cut off all the resistance. It wasn't something they were trained how to handle. They were on a conveyor belt. They were strapped in for the ride, but they were strapped in. They were constantly moving, but the trajectory was right there in front of them. They didn't have to make those types of choices. So they knew that if they stopped moving, that their legs would give way under them, the conveyor belt would keep going, and they would crash out. They didn't know A, how to get off, or B, how to make a decision of where to go on their own. The problem was that win was all that they knew. Failure was not an option. It's the whole point. They froze from all of that pressure. They were in the system. They got friction. They weren't told how to deal with resistance. They weren't told how to deal with this friction. They weren't told how to fight for their leadership positions that they were promised that clearly weren't there for them. And instead of being the resilience that they should have been educated and taught how to do, they did the flight option, right? The fight or flight. They retreated. They decided that we're just going to stop any bit of conflict before it comes to us. In order to do that, you have to control everything else except for yourself. That's what they decided. They had to remove every bit of challenge that could even put the possibility of failure out there. Because if the possibility of failure was facing them, they couldn't handle it. They could not fail. It was a triggering idea, and we know that trigger warnings, they don't help people be resilient. They help people flee so that they don't have to get triggered, not deal with the things that are triggering them. So when the conveyor belt eventually ended, they're stuck in the C-suite. Basically, the entire set around them was removed. They're stuck in a group of themselves in some empty room in an echo chamber because they removed everything else. Because they were so intent on removing every bit of resistance, every bit of difference, every bit of need to compute or to have any bit of discomfort. Discomfort is how we grow. We need to be uncomfortable in order to move forward and grow. And because they removed all of that, they essentially left themselves, this entire generation, in an empty, sterilized room altogether with nothing to do, nowhere to go, and no idea of how to get out, or that they even might need to. Because they didn't ask for better wages, fairer hours. Activism became a flight response rather than let's actually fix the system. Activism became, I don't want to do anything. I will not compromise anything. They didn't learn how to negotiate. They didn't understand that business has to do with actually sacrificing something, making compromises to get to the greater good. They became individual. They became completely self-centered. Everything was focused just around them. There was no community. There was no we. There was no concept of doing anything together as a group. It was all about me, me, me. In all of this, they also decided that the word no was toxic. that any boundary was toxic, that any bit of structure was patriarchal or toxic. To them, any boundary, even designed to keep us safe as a society or to help guide our behavior, to teach us, to train us as a whole, to keep us riled in so everyone can live together safely, they felt like any of those were attacks, like personal attacks on their lives and their identities and their feelings. They were pushed so far to one extreme that they could only see the extreme opposite in it. They didn't understand that actually giving your child boundaries and rules can make them feel safe, can give them structure. Children need structure. It makes them feel secure, and it helps them understand things. It helps them compartmentalize the world. It helps them feel like you are taking care of them. It helps them understand things that seem really complicated. Actual boundaries and structure are very healthy for people and necessary in our lives for us to function and learn how to function. When we do not learn how to deal with a boundary, when we see a boundary not as maybe this is not just a wall that, oh, there's actual walkway. If you just want to keep walking, the walkway continues. You just have to turn because that's like an actual wall. It's holding up the building, girl. Keep moving. No, they want to break the wall. That's just not how life works. There is a pathway. This is a building. It's being held up. There are borders and boundaries to hold a building up. You can't just walk through a wall. You just can't do it. And it's not because people want to suffocate you or hide your individuality. It's because the building needs to stand. And that's what our society needs. It needs to stand. So any standard expectation, any normal structural wall became trauma, and they became victims. And suddenly, victims were on pedestals. Victims is how you got attention. Victims is how you got validation. Victims is how you got to avoid any work, any friction, and that became the go-to terminology. Trauma and victimhood. That became the new crowns. Why? Because they didn't want to have to do anything else. They didn't want to change, evolve, and become heroes, become not victims. They didn't want to get out of trauma and feel better. They just wanted to live in trauma forever. Trauma's real. You got to work through it. And then you got to move past it. You can't live in trauma. Our bodies and our minds cannot survive like that. We will go insane. So that's now we're in a point, because they got to a point where a simple rule became an act of violence. And now they see everything as violence against them, against their identities, against their lives, against their ideologies. It's everything is just apparently a violent act. And that is mentally how they're cataloging things. So if we want to look at this Trojan Horse concept, they infiltrated and they weaponized systems. They weaponized systems like DEI. They weaponized systems and ideologies like liberalism, progressive leftism, and they started to even weaponize socialist and communist ideologies. Possibly this was on purpose. Likely this was a subconscious thing initially that just happened because they were subconsciously angry. However, instead of dealing with the anger, like I said, dealing with trauma, they are out for revenge. It's just, we're in a one big revenge fantasy here. That is our lives now. That is the corporate world now. That is entertainment now. Not people dealing with themselves, but people who feel oppressed, who just want to take it out on everyone else, the oppressors and other people, because it's really just about them. They honestly don't care about anyone else. Basically, an entire generation had come into adulthood with PTSD. And no way or desire to get over it. They began to use the language of equity to mask their absolute refusal to put in any effort. They were not the first to do this, but they really did push this tactic to its absolute limits. And all in doing so, they were teaching their children how to do the same thing. Like I said, we don't live on an island. We are not in bubbles. We affect each other. And the mindset that they did learn was that if something didn't succeed immediately, it wasn't their fault. It wasn't about endurance or maybe a lack of skills on their part. It was a systemic issue that was oppressing them specifically, that was attacking them, that was violent toward them. And it had nothing to do with them having to change or get better ever. Yeah, there are bad systems, but also sometimes you just got to work harder, and you've got to compete with people who are working hard. You can see what the radical response did. It moved women into a place where they were actually seeking equality, an actual system that was broken, and they were working with men and women. There was a men's liberation and a women's liberation movement happening at the exact same time for equality. It moved away from that into this weird misandrist mess that we are looking at today. They had access to an entire world of cultural buzzwords and therapy talk. They could sound really, really smart. They had a lot of information. Not sure exactly what to do with the information, which is really what knowledge is. It's not just information, it's how to use it. So they started to decide that masculinity was a disease. They started planting seeds everywhere, in entertainment, in kids, in their parenting styles, in education system, convincing society that any form of manhood, any form of masculinity was actually toxic. It really created a double bind for men, that if they showed any masculinity, any leadership, they were ostracized for being toxic. But at the same time, they became passive, they held back, then they just sort of disappear into the background, because other men, and mostly women, are taking all of their roles. So they get stuck in a space. And in this generation, the men are then starting to be left behind, like they're not part of this group. As you can see, that start to happen in this mid-stage to late-stage millennial group. But now, it's if any person shows ambition, they're toxic, they're a pick-me, they're whatever is the fancy buzzword to throw out that day. So millennial feminists decided to build a culture of men who they categorize as lazy, but who they effectively strip of any agency or any self-worth. They create them into these objects. They objectify all of them like they're not even humans anymore, and they're the default de facto enemy now in everything. Real life and entertainment. They made insidious progressive changes to our politics, to our educational systems, to our corporate rules, to our cultural dating scripts. They completely destroyed the foundation of our modern culture as we knew it. And they normalized a culture where blaming others is now celebrated as speaking your truth. And there's not even a real truth. Everyone has their own truth or a lived experience. None of that stuff makes sense. There is one truth. You may have an experience. You may even believe something completely different, but there is something true. There is only one truth. It's not everyone's own. There's one. You may not know the truth. You may think the truth is something else. I may think the truth is something else, but there is one truth. And that's just how life is. But I don't think we realize how catastrophic the damage was that they were actually doing to our entire society until they started to have kids. Because when millennials became parents, they completely lost their minds. So that's what the next video is going to be about. The millennial parent. Why do you think Gen Z is so messed up? It's because of their parents. So let's get into that next. Let me know what you think in this series. It's almost done. I think maybe I'm like halfway through, but I'll probably have a lot more videos here to come in this One-Eyed King in the Land of the Blind series. Definitely leave your comments, like, comment, subscribe, mosey on to the next video if I have it up yet. I'm trying to record a lot of them at once, but I'll probably be posting them sporadically. But as you can tell, there is another one coming. It is happening. So look for that, or don't do anything at all. So you'll see I'm in this outfit, and you'll notice the next video, if I'm not in this outfit, it means I stopped recording. The magic of film. I will see you guys next time.
Let's go.